Talk about a secret hidden in plain sight. This is crazy what I'm about to say. I swear this is like one of the biggest discoveries in history. I'm not joking. Okay, the book His Dark Materials. I am going to make some connections for you that will blow your mind. And thank you to that witch Andorra for bringing this up and reminding me of all my notes on this. Okay, Philip Pullman. He wrote The Book of Dust and His Dark Materials. He is literally talking about plasma and has predicted the future. Please let me explain. This is incredible. It's too obvious. Okay, I'm about to explain why His Dark Materials in the Book of Dust, he's talking about plasma, the fourth state of matter, and how it's literally magical. I'm literally writing a whole book on this. After, you will see these connections. Okay, I have to get into it. Okay, number one, there's something called an alethiometer, a truth-telling device in the Dark Materials. This was a device that was a symbol reader. So the alethiometer communicates with the dust, which is plasma, I will explain. And the dust communicates through symbols. I have made this comparison before in my other videos, but basically plasma is a field. It's the fourth state of matter. It's what we interact with. Our consciousness interacts with plasma, which holds our consciousness. The same as key, Akashic field, quantum field, 0-point energy field. This is the plasma field. It also is called the collective unconscious. And Carl Jung, right before he died, wrote the book Man and His Symbols, where the collective unconscious communicates through using symbols to us. And the symbols are specific to our own consciousness or what our perspective is. Each of us have different symbols. So when you read this alethiometer, you hold the question in your mind, you try not to grasp at the answer. This is exactly what you do when you're trying to ask plasma or God a question. And basically, if you didn't earnestly want to know the answer, you're not going to know it. And very much when you're communicating with plasma or this field, if you don't have a pure soul, it's going to trick you. It's the trickster, just like in mythology. That's a whole nother video. Let me get to even more crazy things. Okay, the Book of Dust, plasma dust. What am I talking about, right? So this book sheds more light on the mysterious substance called dust. There's also a book in the series called Northern Lights. The Northern Lights are the aurora borealis, which is a plasma phenomenon. There's the first hint, plasma, aurora borealis, Northern Lights. Now probably the most insane connection, this back from 2007, there's been way more articles since. Charged dust particles in plasma, which are now called dusty complex plasmas, have similar properties to living systems. They are intelligent, they can reproduce with each other. They're considered inorganic living matter. They're hesitant to call them alive, but since then, they call them alive. Robert Temple wrote a whole book on it called A New Science of Heaven, which is about plasma intelligence. I'm writing a book on it too. There's also plasma crystals. When plasma incorporates dust grains, it acquires an electric charge, forming plasma crystals that can contain organic matter, alive matter, so it holds alive matter. They also have structures that resemble DNA. They're alive, guys. The inorganic dust twists into DNA, dusty plasma. Like, please. One more with names. The Subtle Knife is another name of a book. Subtle energy is another word for, like, plasma energy. Please. This guy's telling us something. And don't you worry, I'll get into his background, where it all will make sense. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Lyra, who uses this alethiometer and researches dust or plasma, meets Mary, who is studying dark matter. Her name is Mary Malone. So Mary is a physicist who is researching dark matter, which is the same thing as dust in Lyra's world. I literally have a theory that plasma is dark matter or dark energy. They're even saying now, let me show you. New theory, dark matter may not exist at all. Guess what? It's plasma. It does exist, but it's plasma. There's no such thing as dark matter, but there is dark plasma. Once again, this is for another deep dive, but this guy, J. Alfred, writes all about plasma and dark astrobiology and his theories on how dark matter is plasma. Trust me, I vibe with him. This guy's smart. He's from Singapore. Love him. Back to what I was saying. Good old Mary. So they also have this thing called daemons, which I've already talked about. It's literally your inner plasma. It's your inner self. It also, plasma means to mold or shapeshift. These daemons turn into animals. Plasma is also the wild feminine, divine feminine. It's animalistic, it's sentient, but it's not conscious on its own. So that all connects, if that made any sense to you. Think of like as above, so below, where there's an outer plasma field and an inner plasma field inside of us. And that is how we shape our perspective of the outer plasma field with our inner plasma field through our consciousness, which is like a membrane outside of us around our aura. And your daemon is your inner genius or your higher self or your plasma. They also have Metatron in here. That's a whole nother friggin' video that has to do with plasma. Oh, but this talks also about creating and nourishing life that is the life has become self-aware, and that there are also these I think sentient beings called Mulefa. A sentient being is a plasma being. Plasma is sentient, not conscious on its own. It can hold consciousness and we're literally plasma beings that are conscious, which is crazy. But there are also sentient beings that are not conscious. But then they're also conscious sentient beings. Okay. One other quick thing, and then I'll go back to Mary and my whole connection. The subtle knife. It's a knife that can divide subatomic particles and create portals between worlds. I actually think this is something either to do with steel and how it has to do with going through wormholes and using plasma to communicate with other worlds, which will be a future technology. Or I think it is a metaphor for our mind and harnessing plasma to do these things by harnessing subtle energy of some kind. I don't know. That's for another time. But Mary Malone, I bet you, is based on Mary Magdalene, the Great Mother, that represents magical and portal and doorway. I actually think the vessel in Mary Magdalene, the vessel is plasma. Once again, a whole nother video. I really think Mary Malone symbolizes Mary Magdalene, and she can harness plasma because it's the female archetype who has the secrets of harnessing plasma. Happy to do a deep dive on Mary Magdalene. Write Mary Magdalene write Mary in the comments. I'll know what that means. Just trust me, you want to hear that one. She has a lot to do with Inanna and Isis. Okay, so Philip Pullman. Not only was his first book called The Haunted Storm themed around Gnosticism, which has to do with wisdom and definitely plasma and Mary Magdalene, but they don't call plasma, but that's fine. He literally said he was inspired by William Blake. William Blake wrote The Marriage Between Heaven and Hell, basically talked about striking a balance between imagination and intellect. Imagination is the realm of plasma. Intellect is the realm of consciousness. It's about mixing them together. It's about action and surrender. It's about creating your reality and surrendering to the bigger picture's reality of your soul, which you might not always be in touch with because you're in your ego. And if you get back in touch with your heart, you realize sometimes you have to let things go because you don't, for instance, if you wanted to be with your boyfriend from high school, that probably wouldn't have worked out that well. At the time, you thought you really wanted that and knew you wanted that, but that was actually not your heart and soul. Hopefully that made sense. But this guy wrote a lot of mystical texts and he inspired Philip Pullman. I think Philip Pullman channeled a lot from him. The real interesting one is Paradise Lost, which was by a poet, John Milton, which was also about heaven and hell, kind of, the temptation of Adam and Eve, the fall of Satan. So this inspired the whole book. This is John Milton's writings. It says, "Into this wild abyss, the womb of nature and perhaps her grave, of neither sea nor shore nor air nor fire, so not the elements," it's ether or plasma, the fifth element, "but all these in their pregnant causes mixed confusedly, and which thus must ever fight, unless the mighty maker them ordain his dark materials to create more worlds. Into this wild abyss the wary fiend stood on the brink of hell and looked a while, pondering his voyage, for no narrow frith he had to cross." Make your own connections, but I think this obviously sorry, my brain's blowing up. This obviously points to the plasma field, the divine feminine, birth and death, the creator, it's the destroyer, it's Kali, dark materials, dark matter, dark plasma. It's the space between the stars that creates. There was, in mythology, some people thought that it was actually the space between the stars that created the stars, which is true. Just like Dave Matthews Band, the space between. These clues are hidden everywhere, people, once you know where to look. I know these like connections seem insane, but they're not. Or maybe they are, whatever. Either way, I love plasma. I love making connections. I have so many things I can make connections with. I hope this inspired you. I love you so much. I'm running out of time. Goodbye.